And it was really funny because when we went and saw them, they were obviously not constructed properly. There's a real drop in them, and nicely, when I was looking through the streetscape standards update, I had marked it with a paperclip. We had a nice picture of what it was supposed to be, and it's obviously not designed this way, what's currently. So I don't know if the city engineer and staff has been out to look at these, but what we approved, which is in the diagram from the North Washington streetscape, is not what they built. And it's not safe. It has a massive drop in places of 5 or 6 feet.
Yeah.
If someone falls in it, they're going to
kinda-
get hurt.
Yeah, it's not safe, I don't think.
And I see they paid a lot of money for that study.
Yeah.
I think there were real flaws in the design that were created, and we had a lot of things we had to do to try to make things work. Also, I would say that area, if the building was set back 20 feet, as it's now required, those areas would be twice as big as they are now. I think we need to really revisit those plans. My sense is the streetscape is much better off for a place for trees, pedestrians. We have scant little bit of that. I really question how much utility we're getting out of these bioretention areas in terms of actual utility as opposed to,
Well, the
symbolic utility.
bioretention facilities, as was worked out when we were working with engineer and staff at the time, was that there would be trees in them. And first off, these don't have trees in them like they're supposed to.
And our
And
arborists-
it's clear from the diagram that they did not layer it properly. They just didn't build it as per the diagram. It does not fit what the diagram has on there.
We can give you a more detailed piece on this, but our arborists, our city arborists, Shirley Street and others, in trying to implement the plan as was approved, felt that the trees would not work. They would never be able to root properly. And so we had to redesign these things to make them work because I think the work done in that study was not really viable. And so trees have been moved outside of those areas per the advice of our arborists. I think we need a full revisitation of that kind of a after-action report on, they were very expensive to build. We question how good of a result it is. And I think before we build another stretch of this, we need to take a hard look at it. It's one of the reasons for having the streetscape standards
Well, obviously,
looked at.
if it wasn't able to be built as it was, shown to us as a diagram,
Right.
show it to be built, then we definitely shouldn't be building any more of them, and we should definitely change how they're being built. I just do think looking at them, having gone there and stood and looked at them, that they're just not layered up properly. It doesn't make sense to me the way the soil and the sand and everything was put in there. It just seems to be missing. So
They could function almost as well if they were shallower.
Yeah, they
Well,
would have.
and I would say, I think there's a question of, also of, what do we do with the space between the curb and a building? And how much of that is for pedestrians and how much is for other functions?
Well, I would just say that
And I think
the current amount of
I would
space.
lobby for pedestrians.
I understand what you're saying, but I think the current amount of space that bioretention beds are taking up is about the same amount where we just have trees. And as someone who walks with children, I really feel like that those beds and trees really you really want that between you and the traffic. It makes you feel safer. And so if it was pedestrian all the way to sidewalk, then you would really, to me, that feels like a less viable walking area. It's less.
One of our concerns
So,
with this
I'm
plan as
not
we were
suggesting we
reviewing
don't
it
have
was
trees.
there were not enough trees because those beds were not viable for planting trees.
Right.
They basically have a bottom in them. There's a whole
Right,
drainage
right.
system, and the trees really cannot, they're potted plants when they're planted in those,
Well,
essentially.
these designs, we didn't come up with these designs. These designs were set up by other groups. So maybe we need to go back to the organizations who put these engineering together and ask them, how is it working where they're doing it in other places? But anyway, I understand this is something we have to look at.
We could have a more detailed, I think it'd be useful to have, as I said, kind of an after-action session on this. It's really not my particular area of expertise, but to sit down and talk to the arborists and others who are involved in looking at how to make this concept that was approved actually work in the field, and also talk to the people who built the project who were very frustrated with the expense and difficulty of building it.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's a very good topic to revisit, and we are not, I don't think it's met the expectations that one would have thought when looking at the original plan. So I
But-
would agree with you.
I just wanted to add, there's some real concern on the part of the property manager that you might want to touch base with.
So in other words, if something needed to be done to them because the property owners have already paid for the landscaping or whatever, it's the retention beds, any changes that we wanted to make or that we recommend to be made would have to be picked up by the city, is that correct?
I would think so. I mean, this was much more expensive to build than the Broad Street standard, which was the original approval for this project.
Okay. All right, are there any further comments on the, I think maybe we should also mention at this time that the August 21st and the September 2nd meeting of the Planning Commission has been canceled due to lack of agenda items.
We thought if the commission is agreeable, that would make sense to have one meeting in August and one in September. The September 2nd meeting follows the holiday weekend, and so we thought the second meeting would make more sense. But that's really topic for the commission. If you all agree with that, we can make sure that that's publicized.
Any objections by any commissioners?
Oh, shucks, we can't meet?
No objection.
I guess the only objection I have is we have so much
We've
things
got
that
a
are
lot to
pending.
do.
Yeah, redoing parking regulations, looking at the streetscape, and so I guess I always feel bad about missing an opportunity to work on those
Well, we could
items.
always do a work session, but we wouldn't
Yeah.
have a regular meeting.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think that would
so
be
if
fine.
something comes up that we need to do a work session on,
Yeah.
Maybe that might be a good idea for this.
And one of our concerns about that September
September.
meeting is a lot of people started school that day, and
Yeah.
just it's a tough time of the year for the public.
Actually, don't
Okay.
want to be home then.
okay. So
can move on.
we will move on, and we'll go back to the beginning of our agenda, and we'll move on to old business. And our first item of old business is consideration of a subdivision application number 2013-1259, 2935 North 26th Street. We're going to hold a public hearing and consider approving the subdivision, the application for subdivision. Lauren, do you have any?
Yeah, it's
Still
still
waiting
not.
to see if they're online.
I'm just going to speak real loud and keep my remarks short if you have any questions. You've seen this, here we go. Wow. Now it's working. Thanks, Patrick. You've seen this subdivision before, but it concerns 6935 North 26th Street, which is at the tippy end of Falls Church, the city, as it borders Arlington. RPC code number 51-116-040. Under this plan, the applicant is creating one new pipe stem, two new pipe stem lots, which is a significant change from what started out back in 2013. On the lower left-hand portion of your site subdivision plat is the square foot area, qualifying area, and it does meet the 11,250 square feet required for each lot. The applicant has done everything we've requested, and it's been through several major revisions. And so at this time, we feel comfortable recommending approval of this site plan with two very minor amendment changes, which are reflected on page 1 of the staff report. Does the commission have any questions? I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Does the applicant wish to make any presentation before we start with questions?
Mr. Baskin?
Hello.
Members of the commission, my name is Bill Baskin,
300 Park Avenue.
and I'm here on behalf of the applicants. As I'm sure you recall, when we were here last, you all considered the application. It presented a number of pipe stem lots to be created, and it was rejected for that very reason. We've since redesigned the subdivision and have brought it back to you. I think Mr. Bruce has really covered the main points. I mean, really the only reason it was rejected before was that the number of pipe stems, and we have addressed that. I would note that from the staff report that there's a recommendation for approval from not only planning, but the zoning administrator, from Public Works, the fire marshal, the arborist had no objection, and the city attorney even concluded that you could go ahead and give final consideration to this. So with all of those recommendations, I would just ask you to follow those and approve the subdivision. And I'll be happy to try and answer any questions.
Okay, I do have one question, and that has to do with the parcel of land that's coming from the Pierce lot. And I noticed that they have signed on as owner's consent and dedication. Does that mean that this sale of property has been finalized?
No, it'll have to be
No.
final. I mean, it wasn't going to be finalized. It couldn't be finalized until you approved the subdivision.
Well, normally when a piece of property is taken off another piece of property, it requires a lot realignment or, and we haven't seen anything like that. So
Well,
I just want to make sure that if we go ahead with this, that this will be legal, and that should the miners decide, I mean, should the Pierce miners decide that they've had it with this process and aren't going to sell their property down the line, I just want to make sure that then our subdivision approval would be null and void, I would assume.
It would. I mean, what has to happen is that if you all approve the plat, then there'll be a deed prepared that conveys that portion, that creates the subdivision, establishes the new lots. And Ms. Miners here can address that from her perspective. But if for some reason they decided after your approval that they weren't going to go along with this, then they wouldn't sign the deed and this just wouldn't occur.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that that was the case, because
Sure.
you know, we wouldn't want it to go forward and then find out that this lot was non-conforming, or it didn't have the 40-foot setback, or...
If it goes forward, it'll have to conform with the plat that you approve.
All right, good, that's on record, thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this issue? I have one speaker slip, possibly. But if anyone else is in the audience who would like to speak, we got a lot of emails and a lot of comments on this, so I thought maybe there would be some speakers. But if no one wishes to speak on that, we will ask Ms. Miner if she's interested possibly in speaking.
I'm Madge Miner, 7,000 North Fairfax Drive in Arlington, and co-applicant. And I just want to concur with Bill that Teresa and JR have worked very closely with Lauren and complied with all the requests, and we are very happy that we think this is a good solution for that piece of property, and we hope that you'll agree and vote to approve it this evening. And thank you for all of your back and forth and work and trying to figure this property out with us. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anyone on the Planning Commission? Lindy?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I was going to ask Mr. Collins to talk to us about stormwater and the fact that in our report that no special stormwater treatment, it's all in grading.
What's the specific question?
Well, it's, many times in the report, it said no stormwater improvements are required.
I think no stormwater improvements are required at this stage. As they develop, they'll have to comply with the new Chapter 35 stormwater ordinance. We did ask the applicant to go through an exercise to demonstrate if there were existing, if there was an existing flooding problem that this would either contribute to or exacerbate, and they demonstrated that one did not exist. So at this stage, at the subdivision stage, that was adequate to demonstrate this could go forward in accordance with the ordinance.
And also, I want to make sure that the neighborhood or the neighbors who are concerned realize that, or will get notification of what we used to call Siebert meetings for the grading plans.
Yes,
So
once
they can be aware of what's going on.
Once they come in with development plans as opposed to a subdivision plan, or grading plans as they're often called, there will be a stormwater management review team that would go through our typical notification process, which, forgive me, I don't recall the specifics of it, but it does notify all the.
But it's our regular process.
Regular process, yes.
And that could be something that would be right after this is recorded, or it could be several years down the road.
That's right. It's when they actually go to effect construction on the land.
Right.
Thank you. Then I've got a question for Mr. Bruce. Should we have in our plat had building envelope noted anywhere? You know, and.
I think it's right here, Lindy.
You think it is?
Yeah.
I kept trying to find it.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual, but it's there.
Oh, okay.
See? This is.
Do you have the whole
Maybe shaped
plat
like
in
that?
front
No,
of you?
that's just how
Okay,
far-
okay.
how big they can make it.
Right, okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. And then you have a comment to the, to where it was, comment was made by one of the neighbors that we are acting prematurely.
We have consulted twice with the city attorney. The first meeting dealt with the setback and front and rear lines. It's the attorney's position that it does, and that the zoning administrator's correct in the way he has interpreted this issue, and he carefully, exhaustively looked at the letters that you've received by mail. Second meeting was regarding the whether or not this can be appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the attorney is of the opinion, based on case law in the state of Virginia, that this appeal is procedurally improper and should be dismissed. But that's up to the BZA in terms of what they're going to do. Now, the resident that has applied or has filed an appeal, can obviously go before a circuit court, but that's different than the BZA appealing your decision tonight.
No, it's more, and I can't find it, but more referring to that 28-day situation.
The 28
Or
days,
the
you mean
20
out of your rules and procedure?
right.
Rules of procedure?
Right.
Maybe I've got the wrong citation. It says the planning division no later than 28 days preceding the meeting at which the application is to be heard.
And no later than,
So that's preceding.
right.
So I think we're within
Okay.
that.
Just wanted to double check and have it in public record.
Okay.
Thank you. Melissa, any?
Is that the correct citation that you're
Yeah.
referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Russ? Anything on?
Just real briefly, this portion feels like it's going very fast, but to those who have not followed the process all the way through, this is the third time I've seen this, and I missed one meeting, so I believe it's the fourth time the Planning Commission
Right.
has seen this. So I'm prepared to vote with very few questions, but I do want to just let the public know that I personally, and speak pretty confidently about the rest of the Planning Commission, has reviewed this very carefully, and I've certainly read all the correspondence and emails and asked many questions over the past several months. So while I'm prepared to vote very quickly here this evening, it's not after a great deal of consideration.
Thank you. I think we all feel that way.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, thanks for saying
because
that.
This has been a long process.
Andy?
Yeah, my only comment was just to note that you guys have a couple of changes suggested, so if we approve today, those changes will occur, or else.
I would include both changes as part of your motion, just to make the motion complete.
Sounds good.
I'm not finding that.
It's right here.
Contingent
Oh,
upon
okay.
staff administrative. Yeah, the contingency.
All right, okay. Okay, thank you.
It's still labeled issues.
Yeah, okay.
That's what it is, change.
Is that your only question? That was it. Okay. If there's no further discussion, then I guess we're ready to go to motion. Andy? Yes, you do.
And then connect it with this down here.
Down here where it says staff recommends.
Come on, you can do this.
All right, sorry about that. All right, I move that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final approval of subdivision plat application number 2013-1259 contingent upon staff administrative review and approval of plat labeling minor corrections as noted here on the final plat under pipe stem lot notes, change lots 2 and 3 to lots 1 and 2, and adding a note to read, quote, "A portion of the proposed subdivision lies in Arlington County, Virginia, and a separate subdivision plan must be approved by Arlington County, Virginia, prior to the final plat recordation."
Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve subdivision plat application 2013-1259 with the staff recommendations. Is there any further discussion on this motion? No? Ms. G, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Hockenberry?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Wodisca?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. G. And thank you for all of your patience and resubmissions, and I think now we have a project that is able to go forward, I hope. Okay. There's no new business. Well, that finishes with our old business, and there's no new business. So we can, I will consider a motion to adjourn so that we can meet in joint work session with the CACT, the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, and receive a briefing on the work of the Seven Corners Task Force.
I move that we adjourn.
I second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Leading the task force on the revitalization of Seven Corners for the past, for over 2 years, obviously. He's been involved in planning for well over 25 years. He's held about every position there is to hold in the county. He's currently a developer, but he was on the Planning Commission in Fairfax County. He was Reston, Virginia's first planner. So he's very well qualified, and I think Supervisor Pennygross has chosen wisely in picking John. So John, why don't we start with you, and you can introduce everybody. And
thank you, Lauren. Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, members of the Citizen Advisory Committee. As Lauren indicated, my name is John Tillman. I'm an urban planner by profession, and 25 years is about half of the experience I have. I started in 1969, so it's been a long time, since 1972 in Northern Virginia and Fairfax County on the staff, and on the Planning Commission, various other positions. Long story short, I have with me tonight some people I'd like to introduce, then I'll tell you what we've been up to. Mary Ann Gardner, sitting right here. Mary Ann is the Director of Long Range Planning for Fairfax County. Sitting to her left is Joanne Phoebe. She's with the Office of Community Revitalization. She's our architect staff member that has done most of the heavy lifting as far as design goes for the task force. Bernie Sutchell, where's Bernie? Bernie works with Mary Ann. Bernie's job is to actually put the language together for the comprehensive plan, and he's been hard at work at that for about a year and a half. We keep making changes, and it keeps driving him crazy, but such is life. Mike Garcia sitting behind him. Mike is a transportation planner with the Office of Transportation, and next to him is Chris Morley-Safer. Chris is also a transportation planner with the Transportation Office. So let me tell you a little bit about what we've been up to for the last 2 years. Supervisor Gross decided, it was a little about, not quite 2.5 years ago, she had me and a couple of other people into her office. I'm on the Bailey's Crossroads Revitalization Task Force, and I also serve as Vice President of the Southeast Fairfax Development Corporation, which is a public-private partnership on revitalizing Route 1 and Lake Ann revitalization, other things. She said, you know, Seven Corners has been neglected for a long time. She's had pressure from various people over the years that something ought to be done with it. And once the Bailey's plan was redone about 3 years ago, she started thinking about what to do with Seven Corners. So she pretty much had some people in, decided what she was going to do was have a visioning exercise. We had 4 visioning sessions. Anyone that was interested living in the Seven Corners area could come to the visioning sessions. I think we had 150 people at one of the meetings, and we generally had over 100 at all 4 of them. From those sessions, there were subgroups that disaggregated themselves and came up with ideas on what to do with Seven Corners, and it was unanimously suggested to Supervisor Gross that the land use and transportation plan for Seven Corners be seriously evaluated with the possibility of doing a new plan. From that, she decided, well, let's set up a task force. And so she put a task force together, asked me if I'd be willing to serve on the task force. I said, sure, as long as I can sit in the back. I'm on 4 other boards out every night. If I can sit in the back and sort of make cheap shots, right? Just be quiet and not have to go to all the meetings. She was fine with that. She appointed two chair people, and at the next meeting, she asked if I would be willing to fill in occasionally. And I said yes, and so she made me co-chairman. And so that's how it all happens these days, right? What we decided to do was something different. Since I'm a professional planner, it would be like if you took Mary Ann and said, Mary Ann, I'm going to make you chairman of the task force. And what we would do is something different than what normal citizen task forces do. We realized that if you have a task force, the first thing you've got to do is get everybody on the same page. And you can't do that by starting to talk about land use right off the bat, and transportation and zoning and planning, all those things. So we spent the first 8 months, I wouldn't allow anybody to talk about land use. What we did was we got everybody on the same page. What that meant was we had outside experts come in, both members of the staff and experts in the Washington metropolitan area that we could call upon. And I'll just run through some of the things we looked at. First thing, obviously, staff talked to us about planning and zoning and how it's accomplished, the development patterns that took place, public facilities, schools, environment, that sort of stuff. Population dynamics, which was a really important thing, because one of the things we learned is that the average income in the Seven Corners area, that's 600 acres, not all of Seven Corners, the average income is $41,000 a year, and Fairfax County's average is 107. So there's a huge disparity. What we're dealing with is a lot of older housing, and we're dealing with people that aren't spending disposable income. Therefore, that has a direct effect on the kind of retail you have and the kind of jobs you have and everything else. So that was an eye-opener for everybody. We had experts come in and talk about multifamily. Not only multifamily, how it's done, how it's financed, how it's redone, tax credit programs, all that sort of thing. We then had the transportation people come in and talked about things like transportation demand management, transit, traffic, NVTC, and I'm sure you have seen this study. NVTC did a study of Route 7. They came in with a series of alternatives. We had them in 3 times to talk to the task force. And we finally ended up agreeing that either BRT or light rail made sense on Route 7. And none of us realized that Route 7 is the second highest transit corridor in Fairfax County. Richmond Highway's the first. And it's from Alexandria to Tysons. It's through traffic that we're dealing with. And that was an eye-opener for us, and that has an effect on what you can do with transportation. We looked at mixed-use development. It's a term everybody throws around, but what really is it? So we had developers come in and talk to us about what mixed-use development is, how it's accomplished, how do you finance it, how do you do it, and where it's successful, where it's not successful. Of course, the best example of a mixed-use development is the Reston Town Center. And I can say I was the planning commissioner that made that happen. Over a year and a half worth of 50 citizen meetings and 12 speakers at the final public hearing that were all in favor. So you can do things right if it's done right. But that's the best mixed-use example. What are the other ones? And we went through some of the other ones. How can we accomplish it here? Because we're not talking about silos of development. This would all be residential, this would all be retail, this would all be office. We need to mix that stuff together. And one of the big reasons for mixing it together is it has a direct effect on transportation. It actually cuts down on trips. Employment and economic development. The Fairfax County Economic Development Authority sent staff in, and we had 2 nights on that. How do you make streets cool? How do you activate street frontage? So we had the world's experts come in to talk to us about that. It was Street Sense and Bethesda that's actually done the contract for Washington, D.C., and that program of theirs of Vibrant Streets, if you've not heard of it, go online and check it out. It's gone viral. It's nationwide now, and we're using that as an example. And then, of course, we looked at all of the other things in Seven Corners, the existing retail, how do you convert it? What is retail going through nationally? And I think one of the things we heard was that last year, almost 20% of all retail sales were online. So when you see vacant retail stores, there's a reason for that. If you start to see the big box retail stores go away, it's because Amazon and company are now locating warehouses on 81 near Winchester, and then in 24 hours, they can actually get to the Northern Virginia area where they don't have to have the big box that has all of the stuff in it. So bottom line is we spent all that time talking about those things. At the end of that process, we had a charrette. We invited Lauren and Jim Schneider in. And by the way, Lauren's been to all of our meetings, so he's been sitting there, and we've appreciated him coming to all the meetings. We had a charrette. And we invited Arlington County in, we invited you all in, we had all of our, a lot of our neighbors in, and the task force and staff experts. We had a number of tables, and it was amazing at the end of that 6 or 8 hour process that Joanne set up, all the tables developing plans separately came up with the same concept. It was amazing. So obviously, it paid off to get everybody on the same page. Everybody understood what mixed use is all about, what retail is all about, et cetera, et cetera. And then we spent the next 2 months doing the same thing for transportation. At the end of that process, we then had a transportation charrette, and we came up with a series of alternatives that the staff then took, and they came back to the task force with a number of different alignments, and you'll see the one that was chosen tonight. So that's been the process, and I think it's been a really good process. And that's really all I have to say. I wanted to sort of set it up for you so that when Bernie speaks and lays out what the plan is, you'll have an idea that this isn't something that just was sort of created. This is something that evolved over about 1.5 years, but it was really the last 6 months where we rolled up our sleeves after that quote-unquote training exercise to get us all on the same page. Thank you.
John, before you sit down, you might want to mention that what Bernie has been working on is currently a draft, because you're still receiving comments, correct?
We are in the process
You're
right now.
not ready to
Right.
go to the planning
Yeah.
commission yet.
And I should also mention that every third meeting, we have public information sessions, so anyone's allowed to get up and speak. And we've had a few of those that have been kind of interesting. At one meeting, we had like 35 or so people or 40 people that showed up. And then we had one not long ago where 150 people showed up. And so there's definite interest in what's going on. We have not adopted anything at this point. What we have is we have a charrette plan that's been refined that I think is going to end up surviving and being acted on. And what Bernie's going to talk to you tonight about is this is where the current state of the draft. We will have another meeting in August, and we'll have 2 meetings in September, and we have 1 possible meeting in October. If we need it, chances are we probably won't, I hope. And then it goes to the Planning Commission in October, the Board of Supervisors in November for approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you log on to the screen, please?
Log in.
That's true, that's true.
Good evening. My name is Bernie Suchicito. Thank you, Planning Commissioners.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman. Bernie Suchicito with the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Zoning. What you have on the display, so, there we go. So, this past October, the County Board of Supervisors authorized our plan amendment 2013-1-B2, Seven Corners Special Study. Basically, it's the area that you see highlighted in red, the Seven Corners Community Business Center, which incorporates basically centers on the Seven Corners interchange of Route 50, Arlington Boulevard, Leesburg Pike, Route 7, Wilson Boulevard, Sleepy Hollow Road, and West Broad Street at the nexus there. And then it also incorporates the larger shopping centers where the Home Depot's at, the Target, the recently renovated Safeway, as well as the Wilston Multicultural Center across the street from the Seven Corners, as well as the Sears department store on Leesburg Pike, a number of older multifamily garden-style apartments, both north of Route 50 and south of 50 along Patrick Henry Drive, as well as the medical office buildings southwest of the intersection of 50 and 7. So areas to the southwest, we have the Sleepy Hollow neighborhood, a very well-established single-family detached community. To the north, we have City Falls Church. To the northeast, we have Arlington County. And so I'd like to begin from, we took the concept area from what the concept that what the task force and the members of the community, we took it and formalized an actual plan amendment, or started to build the basic structures of the proposed plan amendment. We received all the input from all the different meetings and summaries, and we started to craft what the area would look like. Staff emphasized a new planning guidance in 3 areas that we are carving out, called the opportunity areas. As you see here, the opportunity areas are shaded in pink. Land units A, B, and C. The transitional areas, which are blue, which are in the eastern and western fronts. And then we have the minimum change area, which is gray, which is down in section F2. Staff emphasized new planning guidance in the opportunity areas by keeping base recommendations for the land units, which are based on existing conditions, and incorporating new development options based upon the task force concept. The transitional areas are areas that can be considered for future redevelopment under a concurrent planning and zoning review process. And the long-term vision for the minimum change area, which is right along Patrick Henry Drive, is to remain how it is today. We took this as an opportunity that the current plan text for Seven Corners CBC doesn't really allow or encourage much redevelopment, as the plan text kind of identifies the status quo. So there was no incentive to redevelop. By going through this exercise and focusing for now on the 3 opportunity areas, which is the core area, we provide new incentives, new flexibilities, and options for property owners in the community to revision and redevelop the core of Seven Corners. With the redevelopment option, there comes a process that would include coordination of development. Fortunately, for the Seven Corners area, the bulk of the CBC is made up of larger parcels, which are owned by just a handful of property owners. Contribution to the transportation network, which Mike Garcia from DOT will explain further in detail about the extensiveness that we went into the study. Conformance to urban design and urban street guidance, which I'll get into later. New standards for public parks and public facilities, and providing enhanced green building certification per long-standing county policy. Compatibility with adjacent land uses, and also provide a significant affordable housing component. As you know, or if you're not aware, a number of the units within the CBC are listed as affordable workforce housing units right now. So, with the first exercise with the task force members and the community, we identified a general framework plan, as you see. We have the 3 areas of the opportunity areas, the Wilston Village, which is yellow on the north side of Route 50. The green in the center is the Seven Corners Town Center. And the blue is the Leesburg Pike Village. The bulk of the density, the community wanted to be concentrated within the town center, right in the center of the CVC. And then Leesburg Pike Village and Wilston Village would be provided more as a transitional, as they transition from higher density to lower density and intensity from the core down to the neighboring areas. We also have the roadways, which we call this task force bridge, or the spine road, which is let's see if I can, there we go. if you follow the arrow, this is what we refer to as the spine road, which is a major collector road that will help tie in the three different villages into one cohesive neighborhood. And then we have on the north side a village main street, which will be a focal point, as well as creating a larger focal point in the Seven Corners Town Center. And then we transition from higher density along Leesburg Pike into much lower density that's more compatible with the existing Sleepy Hollow neighborhood. We also, as you see here, a realignment and redesign of the interchange of Seven Corners, which will come in later stages. The task force basically concentrated their planning efforts and their visioning efforts on the three opportunity areas, leaving the western and eastern ends for transitional areas for future studies. We then looked at what's there and what's on site and also off site, and started to create what we call the maximum building heights plan. As you know, we are approaching this planning document as a form-based planning approach. Basically, what we'll be doing is creating a box, a building envelope, by setting certain parameters, but then leaving a lot of creativity and flexibility for the developers to do as they will, so long as they meet certain parameters. We are not assigning FAR, floor area ratio, as what's usually found in our other terms of density and intensity throughout the county. Instead, again, we're doing form-based, which, as this plays a major role here in terms of height. As you see, the highest center is along the center on the western edge of the Seven Corners Shopping Center, with the peak of 10 floors. We also have another high peak on the northern edge of the Williston Village Center, and that's to complement the existing, I believe it's the Cavalier condominium towers on the north side of Wilson Boulevard. And then everything kind of transition, kind of like a layered cake as it gets closer and closer to the edge. But with that in mind, as well as some of the framework plan that the community created and task force created, the building heights plan, several other additional ideas and inputs, we crafted our concept plan. Again, it's just a concept. We have some of the basic road alignments in place here. This concept plan helps the community identify future needs and assessments, such as where we would like to see additional open space, green space, urban parks, linear parks, where we would like to see our concentration of commercial retail to create that village main market street feel. This also helps identify special uses, such as right here in the center of the Williston Multicultural Center will eventually be redeveloped. We hope to be as a common green and possibly a future governmental use building. And we have a larger common green towards the south on the Seven Corners Shopping Center site to be as the main focal point, gathering points for festivities, plays or speeches, or whatever the needs the community feels that would be appropriate there. As you see, the dashed line that goes kind of around the Seven Corners interchange is just a concept. We haven't done thorough in-depth study, and since we didn't do a more in-depth land use study on the area around the interchange, we're leaving that for a future date. But we went ahead and identified a conceptual loop road, which Mike Garcia will go in further detail. I'm going to go through this quickly here. So what you have before you now is the Seven Corners concept overall view. As you see here, this line here is Arlington Boulevard. You have Leesburg Pike here. You have our spine road, which will bridge over Route 50 and then connect into Leesburg Pike Village. Right here is generally where the existing Home Depot is located. Over here is the Williston One Plaza and the Williston Multicultural Center here. This is your Eden Center right up here. And the corner at Seven Corners Plaza. As you can see, this is just conceptual, just to help visualize what could be built under our building heights plan and our allotted densities that we've assigned per land unit. And then visual or conceptually, we see on Leesburg Pike side, you have about 6 stories in height of development along fronting Leesburg Pike, and then transitioning down to 4, and then eventually 3 floors for possibly townhouses, and then a linear park or landscape buffer in between them and the existing Sleepy Hollow community. It's important to point out that with this concept also introduces key new transportation linkages that we hope will help further disperse traffic, help the flow of traffic. What we like to kind of say with this plan is that we're taking 7 corners down to 4 corners at the main intersection. Mike Garcia will go further into detail with that. This is a close-in shot of our Wilson Center site, envisioning this as the main village market street, where a lot of activity will occur on the ground level with residential above it. And then possibly a parking garage with a recreational field on the upper levels of the garage. Governmental use at this corner. Focal points of some sort will come at the end to anchor the western edge of the village. Market Street, as you see, the spine road will traverse over Arlington Boulevard with no actual connections with Arlington Boulevard, providing a seamless travel from Wilson down to Route 7. This is a closer shot of the Seven Corners Shopping Center as a concept. And then this is a close-in view of a concept for how it would be built out on Leesburg Pike. Go into further detail later on that we're incorporating new cross sections for urban streetscape guidelines that will incorporate complete streets idea, providing additional space for what we hope will have a enhanced transit option that's higher capacity than buses. Possibly will start out as dedicated bus lanes, possibly moving on to streetcar, light rail, however a mode of transportation it's selected further on down the line, with wider sidewalks that would encourage activation and to basically create Leesburg Pike as the main street for the 7 corners. And this is a cross-section of our transit boulevard for Leesburg Pike. These numbers are still in flux, but looking at the core area, the opportunity areas, we're looking to take the existing residential units from 580 units to roughly, now since we're going by square foot, we've kind of taken an average of 1,000 square feet per apartment, multifamily unit, and 2,000 square feet for a townhouse, purely as a study model. Basically, what we're trying to do is balance the commercial retail presence to the residential presence by creating more of an actual active community that can somehow support the retail there, as well as bring in new opportunities. So we're bringing roughly just south of 600 units to roughly maybe 5,000 units or so, give or take the size and number of units that eventually gets built out. We're also going to be increasing non-residential use from 1 million square feet to just approximately 1.7 million square feet. And then the plan text also goes into urban design with, as I said earlier, providing information on build-to lines, building to height to street width ratios, building setbacks. We go into further in depth with the Parks and Recreation recommendations, introducing, as I said, common greens, urban plazas, pocket parks that we normally don't see in other areas. If you're familiar with the Seven Corners areas, it is severely lacking in open space and recreational opportunities. We have the, I believe, the Upton Hill Rec right on the Arlington County, Fairfax County line, and a small, very heavily used and worn down soccer field behind the Wilston Multicultural Center. Outside of that, there are no other opportunities there. It is predominantly paved over with parking lots, retail stores, office buildings, and highway interchanges. So we're hoping as things get redeveloped, we'll start to see a greening of Seven Corners. And then we have the land unit recommendations at the very end, which breaks everything down to the subunits. Again, the baseline recommendations is what we currently have in the plan text right now, and then we go into more detail with the recommendations for the new opportunity areas, bouncing off the maximum building heights as well as this chart with the maximum numbers for intensity. So the next steps, we'll have a few more task force meeting sessions coming up in August. We hope to have a final plan language presented to our task force on September 9th. For their comments, we come back to the City of Sioux Falls Church to the City Council on September 15th. Go back to our task force for final recommendations. We'll publish our staff report on September 25th, and then we hopefully will go to the Planning Commission on October 23rd and to the Board of Supervisors for public hearing on November 18th. And all of our information can be found on our OCR's website on the slide in front of you. Thank you. And do you have any questions?
I'm sure we do. Are you finished with your presentation, or would you
Yes,
like
ma'am.
us to ask questions now?
If you like, we can go ahead into our transportation segment.
Why don't we do that? That would be great.
Good evening. My name is Mike Garcia with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. I'll be a little brief. Bernie seemed to cover a lot of my stuff with his presentation, stealing all my thunder, you know, my new name for the interchange and everything else. So I guess we'll just get started and go from there. I'm going to try to be brief, give you a little background, let you know that we kind of where we were, where we have been, and where we are now, so that we can get started. When we first started this study, we actually. The part in green is what you see as the study area. It's on the map. It's our CBC. The part in red is our actual transportation study area. And as you can see, it goes beyond the study area. We even go into the City of Falls Church.
We did notice that.
And Arlington County. Because in order to do this properly, we needed to get a full understanding of the entire area and understand all the impacts, knowing that traffic just doesn't stop at the county line. So we kind of wanted to get broad enough that we could get enough of an understanding of whatever traffic analysis we were trying to perform, as well as an understanding of how the task force land use scenario would perform in the future against a future network. So this kind of study area allowed us to get out and to kind of capture what we thought would be the area of impact from the task force land use. So we broke the study into two phases. The first phase really focused on just data gathering and understanding of the existing conditions. In the second phase, that's really where we did a lot of the planning, and we looked at new networks and new land use and try to incorporate it from there. Kind of gives you the dates as well as that we completed the phase one, and then we started phase two. We're currently still in phase two right now, so I'll get to that a little later. But from the phase one, it was more of a vehicular traffic type study. It looked at a lot of the existing conditions, but mostly from the vehicle. But we did also go out there and actually have some field observations in terms of what do we see happening from the pedestrian and bicycle network. From what you can see out there, there's a lack of any sort of bicycle network whatsoever, as well as a crumbling pedestrian infrastructure network. In addition, there's probably across the Seven Corners interchange, there's really no safe way to cross. There's not crosswalks throughout all of the interchange, and there's sidewalks on only a portion of it. Well, you're asking, well, can we go back in and just add sidewalks back to the interchange? The answer is no, we can't do that. We'd have to actually do a structural analysis to see if it could even handle the additional load from just adding new sidewalks onto that interchange. We do have an idea that we're looking at to try to see if we can put pedestrian head signals onto the actual interchange area, as well as help pedestrians get across in kind of in a safe way. There is an opportunity to actually cross it by foot if you actually look at traffic out there today, but you have to kind of cross on the periphery. You can't cross through the middle of it. The other part of it was more vehicular focus. I'll jump down and talk about the rest of the study area, and then I'll jump up and talk about the interchange. As you can kind of see, a lot of the traffic in the afternoon is just traveling through the area, and most of the traffic is actually on Route 50 and Route 7. Route 50 and Route 7 account for about 75% of all the traffic in the actual area. Just kind of a couple other key intersections. Route 50 and Patrick Henry, as you can probably know today, is a level of service F, which means it's failing, and that's on the overall intersection, so it's taking in all approaches. Roosevelt and Wilson and 7 and Patrick Henry, also kind of big intersections for us, are actually operating okay. You might ask yourself, well, why is Roosevelt and Wilson operating at a level, seem to be an acceptable level of service? Well, the answer really isn't having to do with that intersection. It has to do with the upstream, which is why you may not think that it actually operates so within an acceptable range today. So I'm just going to jump to this graphic because I think it's kind of helpful. It'll at least help me kind of explain a little bit about the interchange itself. So a majority of the traffic passing through the interchange is actually not originating from or destined to the study area. It's just people traveling through. The highest volume is during the weekday evening. It's actually not on Saturdays, although that falls a little bit behind. AM is actually behind the Saturday in terms of the heaviest peak through that actual interchange. Most of the approaches are level of service F, as you can probably experience, and then there's long queues and queues basically is how much traffic is actually backed up. So there's long queues on eastbound Route 7, which is right here, on Wilson Boulevard, which is right here, and then additionally also on the ramps, which are coming off of Route 50. So what's illustrated in red is how far cars are backed up during the evening peak period. So and then where it's hashed out in white is where cars continually block the box, which doesn't allow other cars to get through. So the reason I kind of pointed out Wilson and Roosevelt was because, as you can see, the cars back up almost into that intersection, which is why you experience delays or problems at that intersection and why you can't get through. So I just wanted to at least point that out. So these are what our overall findings were from the actual data collection from existing conditions. We actually flew the area by helicopter to kind of capture real life, real world origin and destination. Because of the manner and nature of Seven Corners, a lot of cars are just traveling through. So we really needed to understand how they were getting into the area and where they were going out. So that's really what was key for us, so that when we went through and made recommendations, that we would make recommendations that didn't do undue harm to people just trying to get through it or people wanting to use the area more efficiently. So then we started phase 2. Our objective was to evaluate the task force land use scenario, as well as identify multimodal transportation improvements. And we really focused on the interchange and focusing on we actually had a lot of concepts that came forward, and we ended up going down to 6 to 3 to 2 to 1. So one of our key objectives and one of our measures was to actually incorporate the task force land use scenario. They had their charrette before we had the transportation charrette. So we wanted to make sure that anything we were doing was going to make sure we would promote this land use scenario that was being promoted by the task force. Key to that was the task force bridge, which is right here, as well as promote a more enhanced connected street network. It's really not that connected today. There's only a few points in and out, as well as Route 50 is also kind of a barrier to the area. So recognizing that, we wanted to see if we could find a way to bridge that. What you see on the bottom is the task force concept. That's what we tested with our transportation analysis. It's not what's going to get probably adopted into the comprehensive plan, but that is what we evaluated. And what we evaluated has more vehicular trips than what's actually probably going to be adopted. So we went above and beyond what we actually evaluated. And if we could mitigate that, then we can mitigate whatever other scenario the task force was coming up with that was less than what we tested with our transportation analysis. So as we went back, we had our design charrette. We had it in November of last year. We invited the task force, city staff, Arlington staff, Fairfax staff as well. And then that kind of illustrated our three main focus areas. One was 50, really focusing on the pedestrian and bicycle movements along Route 50, where we're looking for we're looking for trails that would parallel 50, and then how would we get people who were traveling on 50 by walking or bicycling up into the kind of the task force vision, the three village centers that Bernie pointed out earlier. Again, we also focused on expanding the connectivity, so kind of making a grid of streets in the area, and then as well as looking at the interchange itself. So from that, we took all the input that came out, and we went through and developed 6 concepts. We did a kind of a consumer-style matrix in which we evaluated against 5 measures of effectiveness, and if you can't see it, it's vehicular mobility, land use, constructability, right-of-way, and then transit, pedestrian, and bicycle. And all those were weighed. Now, they weren't all weighed the same. You know, some actually came up a little higher. But we did this as a way to kind of see how we could get from 6 to 3. And we did end up getting from 6 to 3. And I'm not going to focus on the 3. I'll just focus on the 1 that we ended up with. And then kind of throughout this process, we just didn't come up with 1. We didn't do it in a vacuum. We were meeting with VDOT. We met with them 3 times. And we met with them in December, then we met with them in March, and then again in April. We also met with city and county staff all at the same time, again in the winter, then in the spring. And then we also met with our own supervisors that are in an affected area. So what ended up being recommended was this concept you see in front of you. It's called Concept B, 2.5 diamonds. I know there's been a lot of talk, at least in terms of the City of Falls Church, of this particular area up in here. But what I'm going to first try to do is explain to you how the concept works. As you kind of can understand, in this area in particular that we had, that's how the 7 Corners area developed its name, through the 7 roads that kind of intersect. But what we heard throughout the transportation charrette was simplify the area. It's confusing, we don't understand it, we can't get in our lanes correctly. So the best way to simplify it was to go down to the 4 Corners intersection. But in order to do that, we actually ended up taking out the Route 50 ramps that connect this area. Well, how do we reconnect Route 50 back to this area? Well, we do it with a system of it's called, well, if you think about a diamond, which has 2 ramps coming in like this, and then you have a major road, well, we split that in half. So we have 2 ramps on this side and 2 ramps on this side. So how does that work? Well, if you're traveling on Route 50, going westbound toward the city of Fairfax Falls Church, and you want to get off of 50, you get off at this point right here. And if you want to get into the city of Falls Church, then what you can do is you can take a right, and then you're on Roosevelt, and all the way up to East Falls Church Metro, or you can take a left and then a right, and then you're on Route 7, heading up into the city of Falls Church this way. Conversely, if you want to get onto Route 50 and you want to head towards the city, you would get on at this point. If you want to get into the into the 7 Corners area and you're on 50 heading into DC, you would get off at this point. And if you want to go to the city of Falls Church, you would take a left and go this direction, and then you can get onto Route 7. Or if you want to go down into the Sleepy Hollow neighborhood, you take a right, and then you're going out down here. And you get onto Route 50 towards the city of Fairfax at this point right here. So I just wanted to kind of explain that. The benefits of this are we have multiple crossings of Route 50. We now have a western crossing. There's currently a western crossing today, but it's not very well used. We now have a new crossing just east of the new interchange, and we have the Task Force Bridge. So now we have actually 4 crossings of Route 50, because we also have Wilson and Sleepy Hollow, which are now directly connected. So this allowed us to actually kind of expand the network, expand the pedestrian network, expand the bicycle network, and not only that, but have a direct connection from Route 7 to Roosevelt up to the city of Falls Church. There is a current study going on by the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission that's looking at high-quality transit on Route 7. This allowed us to take advantage of that, and one of the alignments being evaluated is to actually turn right and go use Roosevelt Bridge to get up to this East Falls Church Metro Station, and then come back down on Washington Boulevard through the city of Falls Church to head towards Tyson's. So this is our concept that was recommended, and it wasn't without a lot of debating back and forth between staff, between task force, between Virginia Department of Transportation, which, by the way, the Virginia Department of Transportation, Arlington County, and City of Falls Church staff have all recommended this concept as kind of the preferred. It's easiest to understand. It increases the connectivity in the area. So we did do an analysis of it real quickly. The existing condition today, over all the intersections in the Seven Corners area, there's about 40 seconds of delay. If we do nothing per our comprehensive plan only has 2 improvements. One is improve Route 7 to 6 lanes in the city, in the county of Fairfax. Got myself there. It's already 6 lanes in the study area, and the other one is Route 50 to 6 lanes as well. That hasn't all been done. But those are the only 2 improvements we have in our comprehensive plan. But if we do nothing by 2040, we'll have an average system-wide delay of each intersection of over 100 seconds. 80 seconds is what's considered level of service F, so 80 seconds and above. If we implement the concept, we will actually get better than what we are today and actually have an improvement. You can see that about a half a minute. Here are our travel times. I'll leave that with you, but what really is telling is that we actually kind of end up doing better in all of our travel times compared to the comprehensive plan for the most part. Here's concept B, here's existing, and then you can see that we're getting better in each time. So our horizon year was 2040, so in case you all are wondering. When we found out, actually, our concept B and our concept C, which I didn't show you, it's called jug handles, were roughly about the same in terms of vehicular improvements. We needed another metric to turn to. Well, we noticed there was a lack of infrastructure, a lack of bicycle, a lack of pedestrian connections. Well, the map on the bottom, which is a little hard to see, is what we could implement for the bicycle network with our comprehensive plan, with basically what exists today, the roads that are out there today. But as you can kind of see, there's a lack of crossing over 50. What this concept B allows is for the multiple connections over Route 50s, and then as well as a chance to actually bike within the area, so you can actually get from City of Falls Church into Seven Corners, hopefully a little easier. So that was kind of one of the recommendations that came forward. The other thing that was actually pretty telling is that in our comprehensive plan network, you actually really couldn't even get to Roosevelt and Wilson within a 5-minute walk. As you can see with our concept B, not only were you getting to Roosevelt and Wilson within a 5-minute walk, but we're almost probably within, I'd say, 8 to 10-minute walk of actually East Falls Church Metro by the time you get up to the furthest point, which is up here. So that walk shed really showed that we were actually able to expand the pedestrian network. This is what will be adopted into our comprehensive plan, assuming this moves forward from the task force through the planning commission through the board. We show a minor improvement a little bit. Well, it's not a minor, but we show a slight kind of connection through the City of Falls Church. We don't show the ring road as it's completed because that would be dependent upon the City of Falls Church to actually want to implement something along that line. What we showed was a concept. What's really important is that actually we keep 7 all the way down to Wilson. That's the important part of the ring road, not to say that that the other connection isn't. It very much is. It's just that that's what we can control. And we show it as it needed to be further studied. This is our new bicycle network that will get adopted. Again, we've went ahead and we're actually recommending cycle tracks on Route 7. Cycle tracks are separated bicycle lanes. They're basically barrier separated, so they have a bollard or some sort of actual physical separation. And that's kind of the bigger one. We're recommending trails, like a major paved trail along Route 50, which is about 10 feet, to kind of accommodate bicycles and pedestrians as well there. Real quickly, this is the rest of our transportation schedule. We completed our report in July. It's still draft. It's with the Virginia Department of Transportation for their formal review. City staff also has it now. We've asked for comments by the middle of September. And then we're hoping to, at that point, we'll have a chance to respond to any VDOT comments that are out there, but We want to be able to wrap everything up by the time, I'd say with our study by, I'd say the end of September, beginning of October. That's where we are, and that's kind of it for me. And then again, all of our stuff is also located on the same website. Yes, it's on the presentation that you've been given. So that'll do it for transportation.
Okay. Did you have another presentation, or this was the end? Okay, so you may as well stay there, because I know we have questions of you. And my first question was, when you said city staff has it now, does that mean Falls Church city staff?
Yes.
Okay. And you also said that Falls Church staff got to weigh in on these concepts, and that they were okay with them.
Yes, we don't have anything formal, it was all informal, but when we laid out the 6, we showed 3 that we were recommending for further analysis, and then from those 3, we came back, did further refinement, showed them again to city staff and Arlington at the same time, and everyone kind of came to the consensus that they preferred concept B as the top of all the 3 that we had left.
The other ones must have been really bad.
Just to kind of give you an understanding of it, we had 6. The 3 that we evaluated, there were 3 that we evaluated that were more regionally focused. They look at really just trying to get the vehicles through the area. They were some crazy designs, and I do have them, and I can actually show them, but they're also on the website too. And then 3 were actually more mobility focused, a little bit more looking at local connections, and then that's where concept B kind of came out. One of the things that we tried to do is one of the parameters is we wanted to keep Route 50 separated through the area and let that traffic just happen, because that's the other major east-west connection besides I-66. But we also wanted to reconnect 7, and by doing that, by removing the ramps and removing Hillwood and reconnecting 7, both in a traditional 4-way intersection, as well as having Sleepy Hollow and Wilson connect directly, it really made things open up easier, movements were easier to understand, and then hopefully there would be less blocking of the box and queuing.
Okay, so, all right, just a sec. I just have one other quick question, and I'll pass it on to other commissioners and the CACT. All of these street recommendations that go into the city, how are you thinking of widening these streets?
No.
So they would remain the same, exactly the same. It's just
Yes.
that there would be some other intersections.
We have no widening of Roosevelt Boulevard, no widening of North Roosevelt Street, no widening of Route 7. There's no widening at all. What we have is what we're going to keep in our comprehensive plan: 6 lanes on 7, 6 lanes on 50. But with the understanding that our 6 lanes will drop at that intersection.
Same
will
as
not
they do
continue
now.
on. Yes.
Right. Okay. Melissa.
Okay, so just so you know, I live on Ridge Place, which is on Roosevelt Street, which is across from the cemetery and across from this new local road they have on there. So my first question is, I don't even understand the concept of having a road come off of Roosevelt behind Eden Center and down behind the car dealership and coming in there, because there's really no trouble going around that section right now. So I'm not sure why we need this extra capacity. Also not sure how you're going to engineer a street back there, because that's a hill there. And then it looks like to me, I guess you're adding a new street parallel to Roosevelt Place that cuts on the other side of Fort Taylor Park.
You're gonna have to just, is it the one up here?
Okay, on slide 12, which we're on.
Yeah, is it this
So
street
you
right-
see where South Street is?
Yep,
It crosses Hillwood, it crosses Broad Street, then it continues up, right?
yep.
Then you have a local road that's coming in there behind those 2 car dealerships, right there. So I'm not understanding what the purpose of that local street is. And am I correct in that you're adding a street that takes Roosevelt Street and pulls it on the other side of Fort Taylor Park? There's a little park in there between Roosevelt Street and the car dealership. I'm just trying to figure out how this is being reconfigured. Because currently, this street, Roosevelt Street, is all residential. It's residential on one side, cemetery on the other. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, is the plan is to try to push more traffic through this residential street?
We were not trying to push more traffic, we were trying to show the connection. We weren't doing any improvements on Roosevelt Street. What's shown in blue is meant to highlight what the network is. Because it's shown in blue, like, just for instance, we have this, I think it's Aspen Lane down here. We're not recommending any sort of improvement down here. At this point, the reason that it's kind of brought in is so that we wanted to be able to tie this intersection correctly. This street is brought in and brought up and then over because we do not want to have offset intersections, one here, very close to each other.
Right,
That's
so,
the reason that's
so
done.
you, right now, you're just showing it, because I don't know if you guys knew there was actually a park there. And you're kind of coming, I understand this is all conceptual, and you really haven't gone out there and looked at the engineering of what you do to cut that hill away and come through that park. But I guess the main thing I'm trying to get to is, right now, you are showing that road moved over. It's not aligned with the current roadbed on that piece, and you're adding this extra local road, and I'm trying to understand what that is for.
There's no reason for us why we probably can't swing this around a little bit more and do something like this, and then eliminate all this up here altogether. There's no reason. What I would like to say is that we are actually we have actual money to actually start engineering this. So we will start that at the conclusion of this study. At that point, we'll open this up, which is why we put on our map that it's conceptual to begin with, and we wanted to. We do understand that we were going to have to have a dialogue with Arlington and City of Falls Church staff. This is our #1 interchange that we need to address in the entire Fairfax County.
No, and I recognize it. I mean, like I said, I live there. I work in Old Town Alexandria. I drive through this intersection twice a day, Monday through Friday. I use it to get to Target. I use it to get to my house. I'm within walking distance of all this, and you're correct. Oh, I cannot walk very far because there's an end to it. And, so I guess I get that it's conceptual. I just want to make sure that as you're looking at these realignments, that you kind of, at the point when you're ready to describe it better, please, I need an explanation for that local road. Because at this point, I don't see the point of cutting through the cemetery and past the dealership and through this park as useful. I'm trying to figure out, and I'm looking at your plan, and I'm saying, as I drive through this, how would this be useful to me? And some of it, I'm not really sure about, so that's all I'm trying to get to.
Can I comment?
Oh, yes.
In our informal tabletop discussions with Fairfax staff, we did note that there are a lot of problematic aspects of how this particular arrangement goes through properties. The right-of-way acquisition, et cetera. And we suggested tightening it up so that it deals more with the commercial areas. For example, you see the street that kind of goes along the back of Eden Center. Well, that's an area that ultimately may well be redeveloped. If that was tightened up and came closer so that you caught, perhaps it would go someday through the Coons property if that ever redeveloped, and you'd have developable parcels. We're trying to keep it tighter within the commercial areas and on the other side of the 24-hour fitness building, which, this goes right through that complex. And so tightening it up would make it more functional from a City of Falls Church point of view in terms of being in concert with some future redevelopment of some of those areas.
And the part of that road that's behind Eden Center exists now. It's how you get to the fitness place, the Planet Fitness back there.
Right.
But there are no developable lots on the other side of that because it is currently a cemetery, and I don't think that's going to change.
Correct.
And then the other part of the property that's not developed is a park. So I'm just, like I said, I'm trying to gain an
So
understanding
in other
of
words,
what
if
we
there
think
was,
that street's
if
going to
that
do.
street did not go through to Roosevelt, but instead came through to Route 7 straight instead of jogging west, this begins to get a tighter circle that would be possibly more functional and fit more with areas that might redevelop commercially.
Yeah.
We had some issues with the western edge of this and how it might work. The other thing we've tried to emphasize is the importance of trying to connect all of this area, including the areas in the city that may redevelop, with the East Falls Church Metro Station, the hub station of the Silver Line, so that we can get a stronger connection there and have a better modal split that actually looks hard at trying to make that work for us as a transit center and have fewer car trips and really take advantage of it. It's some distance away, but it's in minutes, it's quite close, I think, as was pointed out in the walking shed diagram. So that's been a theme of discussion, how to connect across 50, and there are some difficulties in doing that on the Fairfax side. So some of these, there are challenges of land use, buildings, existing conditions on all these plans. That, that's not untypical of long-range future plans.
Okay. Where do I start? First of all, I would like to have a very specific, detailed idea of what is going to be happening with our properties in Hillwood Avenue, on East Broad Street, and all of that little area that's there. Because the only thing I can really find is the conceptual street network that looks as if, but I know that, there's some real changes going on there, and I think that's specifically what we're very interested in, and we don't have details on it.
I mean, what exactly are you looking for?
Well, we've heard, okay, you might close off Hillwood at some point, you might do this, you might do that. What effect is this going to have on any property in the city of Falls Church?
Well, I assume it's not without pains for both Fairfax and the city of Falls Church. I mean,
I'm sorry, what was that again?
not without pain for both the city of Fairfax and City of Falls Church and Fairfax County. There's going to have to be some redevelopment. This is a long-term plan. It's acknowledging the fact that we are going to have to go through some parking lots. We're going to have to possibly go through some buildings in order to kind of implement this sort of long-term future. So in terms of the City of Falls Church, I mean, what we're showing right now is that in order to kind of implement this, we would be working with the City of Falls Church to kind of obtain a connection. Now, how this would occur and the actual property impacts, we have not gone to that level yet. That is still to be determined.
Well, that is of great concern to our citizens. And since this finally just got out, we had no updates on this plan at all, anywhere along the way. And then all of a sudden, it's out on one of our local blogs. And that is not good at all. And so along with that, I would like to know, I know this plan came out in June 14.
This plan has been kind of in the works for a while now.
I know, but, okay, we know that, but the thing is have our planners been able to speak at all these meetings?
Yes.
They just weren't sitting there?
I run the task force. I decide who speaks. And Lauren has been at all of our meetings from nearly day one. Jim has been at a number of them. They've both participated in all the charrettes. And we run a pretty tight ship. We start at 7. I make sure everybody's finished by 9 o'clock, because when you're doing this every month, sometimes twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month, we all have other jobs, etc. We get a lot done. And we have incorporated all the ideas we've gotten from Arlington, all the ideas we've gotten from Falls Church. In fact, Jim came up with one of the more brilliant ideas on the Loop Road that we almost had to force the transportation people to take advantage of, and now we all have. So let me just say that it's been
To be ascribed with this pattern, though, because we've talked about making this much tighter, and we pointed out the conflicts of the pattern as it's shown here. I think
but it was a brilliant suggestion, and right.
We're just trying to.
Yeah.
I don't want to take authorship of it.
Right. Okay.
We've pointed out some of the difficulties with the pattern as it's shown here, and the need to tighten it up and keep it within the commercial areas.
I just want to say, everyone has had a chance to speak all through the process. My telephone number is out there. My email address is out there. Anybody that's ever had any questions, issues, concepts,
Thank you.
discussions.
I appreciate all that. I also would like to know if you made any attempt to talk with the Hillwood Homeowners Association,
No,
which
we
is,
have not.
pardon me?
No, we have not.
And why not?
Well, primarily because I would say they're not Fairfax County residents in the county, in that sense. We have
Hillwood-
talked, well, let me
Okay,
finish.
excuse me.
What we've done is, we've tried to communicate with everyone where there has been land use related density or intensity issues. The transportation plan is fungible at this point. Nothing's set in concrete. So the key thing was to make sure we got involved and interested people that we're going to see high rises, mid rises, density, redevelopment going on. As I say, the transportation plan is not set in concrete and stone. The land use plan really isn't set in concrete and stone. There's still a lot of negotiation going on back and forth.
I appreciate
And
that.
I'll also mention, every third meeting we've had has been open to anyone willing to speak. So we've had, I don't know, 15 or so public information sessions where if someone had an issue, they were more than welcome to come and speak to the task force. And as I mentioned, one of them, we had 20 or 30 people speak. We had 50 people in the audience. It was mostly on schools. 3 weeks ago, we had 150 people show up at a meeting, and I think we had 20 speakers, and they were on a variety of topics. So we have done as much as we could to get the word out, but I have a job. Everyone on the task force has a job.
I appreciate that.
And I've been to most of the civic association meetings, and we just can't do all of it. The
Right.
idea is to get the word out and have people participate.
Okay, I appreciate all that. However, the Hillwood Association is both Fairfax County and Falls Church membership. And then did you talk with the local landowners such as the 24-Hour Fitness, Eden Center, Coons Ford, about any of this?
Well, Madam Chairperson, we have not started our plan of this section of our small area plan.
That's true.
Of this section of the city yet.
That's true.
So we're going to look at this, and what we've been invited to do, and I believe Fairfax has been very fair and very inclusive and very gracious in coming over to our office, briefing us, keeping us informed, and saying any planning commission member can show up, any CACT member can show up, but we have to come up with our plan for this area, and we want to look at the entire area, not just this is Fairfax County, this is Arlington, this is the city. Look at this thing holistically. And they, in my opinion, as a participant and an observer both, I believe that they've done that. They've been looking at this thing holistically.
I think the other piece is, part of the reason we're having this session is to get in front of groups who have not been able or had time to go to these, to look at the plan, collect our thoughts and comments, and then give that direct formal feedback to the process. And that's why we're here. We've made a big effort to try to get folks to attend. On our side, it's been a small group who've been able to go. We've had some sessions here. The reason we're having this group together in the council meeting on the 15th is to get that feedback. So I think the important thing is to identify where we have concerns and issues, identify places that we think we have common ground and should encourage, and collect those comments and feed them into the system so they can be conveyed to Fairfax County and to the staff and VDOT.
Right.
A lot of this is a transportation piece.
My main concern is
the planning staff's main expertise.
Effect not only on our planning, but effect on the citizens involved, and the fact that we've not been having any updates on this as we go along. And I will be perfectly honest, I'm not really happy about that. Now, I know, Lauren, you put out one meeting that you asked me to go to, but very frankly, we haven't had any updates to this as it's been going on. And until it burst forth on a blog. So
we have been telling you and others about the meetings and attending. We are not prime participants. People have been invited. I know specifically we've tried to alert the commission to the opportunities to go on the tours and attend the meetings. Again, we're trying to monitor this and do our own planning work. And that's why we're here tonight, is to have everyone be able to see the plans in detail. We've not seen all of these plans in detail until, the draft, just the draft document that's been presented tonight. So this is part of the process.
Okay.
We're here to hear from these folks, collect our comments, and make sure that we get our voices heard as this goes forward through their own process.
And I guess I'm also sensitive to Fairfax County's the big guy. And, coming in and trying to do something within our city limits.
Ma'am, if I could shed a couple more insight on this. As I mentioned, the area is broken up into 3 planning areas for Seven Corners. And the bulk of the effort for the Seven Corners Task Force has been concentrated in the opportunity areas, the core area, which has still quite some separation away from Falls Church City. The western area around this Seven Corners interchange we're still recommending the current plan text, which is basically status quo. What you see for the transportation concept is purely a concept. It was used to further discussions of how we could address the issue at a future date. As you notice, there was a dashed line, meaning it's purely conceptual. We will study the transitional areas sometime in the future. When? We don't know. Whenever there is time, whenever there is interest in the development community, or whenever there is funding for additional research. There's still plenty of time and opportunity for residents of City of Falls Church to be involved and incorporated in the discussion, possibly when your staff members look at a closer more in-depth study of the Eden Center or that end of the city for possible replanning, is when maybe the county will look at the transitional area. But right now, everything's still status quo. We're not really advocating for any new change in that area. As you saw, again, on the transportation concept, it's purely a concept for a model testing purposes to see how things could work, could evolve, and it's basically kind of sets a very limited, or very conceptual skeleton of how traffic could flow through the area for future discussion's sake. So we can set that groundwork, that foundation for other conversations. And again, especially when we look at replanning, most likely there won't be a whole lot of change in land unit H, which is the home of the 2 towers, of the new hotel that's being built, and that residential mixed-use project that will eventually get built, that was approved for its rezoning earlier this year, I believe it was. There's not a whole lot of change right there because that subunit's already been spoken for. It's just where the Grand Mart, I believe it is, has some development potential. But we will cross that road when we actually get there. But as I said, we focused our long-range planning efforts on the 3 opportunity areas.
But the vote on this will be in November, or going into the Board of Supervisors in November?
Yes, ma'am. The public hearing, and we're hoping for a decision that night, will be November 18th to the Board of Supervisors. And again, it will be focusing on new land use recommendations on the core area.
So there is time
There is
within
still
that
plenty of
very
time.
little short, even though it's, okay.
Again, it's just,
I yield to some other people.
Andy?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions, or comments, really, one question. I think it looks pretty good. I mean, I think this is a good one to pull up because it shows that most of the meaty stuff is that red area. It's not, none of the actual like land use is impacting us directly, and I think if stuff like this happened, it'd be great for the City of Falls Church. I don't know where I'd buy my lumber, but I'm sure I'd figure it out. And I do, and the transportation stuff is the hard part, but I mean, I think you're just saying, hey, if we're going to fix this, somehow some stuff's going to have to go up here, and I'm sure when it comes down to it, we'll figure out something. So I think overall, and I can say for sure, we've been hearing for months about these meetings and have been invited to various meetings. So I personally have felt like I've had plenty of opportunities to get involved if I wanted to. So I think it's great. Hopefully you'll get it approved, and when it comes down to figuring out where the roads might go, we can obviously all get together and figure that out. My one question is, how did you get the survey by helicopter approved? Is that hard to get in the budget?
We actually had to send a letter to FAA.
Jeez.
We spent some good money on it, but it was worthwhile, and it was done pretty well, and we were actually pretty happy. We did it in the morning, and we did it in the afternoon.
Nice.
So it was pretty good.
Excellent. That's all I got.
If I could just make one last comment, and that is that I think what Bernie explained to you a minute ago is really, really important to remember, which is the salmon-colored areas are what we focused on. Everything that's blue is unchanged. So everything that's blue is basically against Arlington and Falls Church. We're not touching land use in that area. The only thing was the conceptual identification of potential transportation improvements. And those are only conceptual at this point.
Yeah.
So what we focused on is the salmon-colored
And I
area.
think this will actually help when we get around to doing our area plan up here. I think the first thing we do is look at what you've got and figure out how what we can plan would go work well with it. I think this basically jumpstarts us when we get to that.
And one of the things we have continued to emphasize, at least you've heard it from me every time I've been there, from Lauren, because we did make a presentation to them early on about the student plan for Eden, the whole East End, was the opportunity between Fairfax, the city, and Arlington County to use the Roosevelt Sycamore Street connection to East Falls Church as an opportunity to take an area that could be very close to the Silver Line if it can connect there, as opposed to having only the BRT or the streetcar be the connection. The opportunity to take advantage of that hub station, I think with 3 jurisdictions, there's regional money that could be used, and to make things work, if we're not taking advantage of that transportation opportunity, I think we're missing the boat collectively.
Russ, sorry. And Paul, sorry.
I'm pretty impressed with the plan. It's certainly a underperforming commercial area. Concern for the city, or concern in my mind, is what extent is even conceptual approval of the main road going to circumscribe what the city our opportunity area that yeah. One of our underperforming areas. We don't have a lot of areas to work with. Right, and that's where, as I mentioned before, we suggested a much tighter radius, if you will, that would use the back of the commercial areas and the edges rather than using the area around the cemetery. I mean, the back of the Eden Center from Roosevelt on through the Coons property and the tip of the city there on where 24 Hour Fitness is, and where the Italian restaurant, formerly Howard Johnson's years ago. I mean, that's a much tighter radius with a lot less destruction of important real estate, both in the city and in the county. I think that restaurant, the Grand Mart, 24 Hour Fitness are all owned by the same parties, even though they're in 2 different jurisdictions. They're all owned by a family trust. So trying to minimize, trying to make something work with them and for both jurisdictions, I think, would be important.
It is important to remember that whenever the county looks at potential redevelopment or a serious in-depth land use study on our borders, we heavily involve the neighboring jurisdiction. Like I said, our main efforts have been concentrated on the core area. Eventually, when we do go into the Seven Corners interchange section, we will reach out to Falls Church City Planning staff, reach out to the community members. When we, again, the dashed line really is just a dashed line. The lines could go in any direction. It's just a concept. And when we actually do get to that stage, we will make sure that there's a enormous effort to reach out to residents of Hillwood, residents of City of Falls Church, residents of Fairfax County members, to make sure that everyone's concerns are identified and addressed to the best of the ability.
One of the themes that we did talk about as a part of looking at there were a lot of alternatives that were looked at, was trying to reduce the potential for Hillwood to be this giant cut through. And so I think that's part of the concept of this plan, while perhaps not fully realized, was to not have Hillwood be this arterial that basically is if you know the shortcut, you can cut through the city at high speed. So that was one of the values we tried to present on behalf of the city in terms of making that intersection work better.
Very sad.
Well,
Elderly people, any information on crashes, particularly involving pedestrians? I don't see a lot of cyclists there, but I'm sure there are.
I see people trying to walk on the grass.
That would be the police department who could ask them and see. I don't know personally. Could ask. I mean, it's kind of hard to go through that intersection at a high rate of speed, but I could see people getting hit. Have that.
on a personal note, Garcia and I did do a walking survey a couple of years ago at the interchange, and it came close to getting bit a few times. So we do realize that is very challenging to get through the intersection. It's not ideal for pedestrians, depending on the time of day. Depending on the time of day, it could be you would see more pedestrians than other times of the day. But we're hoping through this effort, at least in the more immediate future, we can identify opportunities to make spot improvements, to put in, reintroduce sidewalks where they've been crumbled into gravel.
And the county made a tremendous investment in that.
Right.
It doesn't appear to be a great deal of use. I don't know until you really measure the cans. But I guess what I was getting at is Fairfax County is not Falls Church. I urge you to look and see if there's very safe as we sure appears to be risky as you check with the police and find.
There is a pedestrian project in the interchange area to look at putting pedestrian signals to indicate when people can and cannot cross safely. I would assume as part of that, they would also put in crosswalks. But when I went ahead and mentioned that we can't actually add structure sidewalks to the bridges, it's because of we have to do a structural analysis. So we will look for ways to do it safely. But if you're thinking about it, it would probably be walking people around the periphery when people just want to go straight across, and that's not going to be or the safest way for them to get across.
Hal?
Once it's approved, there is funding to go ahead with the, transportation plan to move right ahead in November, December. Is that correct?
There is funding there to help start implementing this sort of concept. Bernie's right, it's a concept. We have to get more into the details. We have to understand what we're trying to do. So when we start moving this forward, just because the study ends doesn't mean that our communication with the City of Falls Church and Arlington County stops. We will continue to move through this process. I think a lot of people both Fairfax, I think in the entire region, are looking forward to this area being improved. Yes, we do have money to do that, but how we start and when we start going about that, I won't be the project manager, but I can definitely relay the concerns from the Planning Commission and make sure that they are in full communication with city citizens and city staff.
Doug, do you have? Doug?
Yes, I would assume both Route 50 and Route 7 are National Highway Systems routes, or they're part of the full highway so it's kind of used for evacuation too. So because of that, we had to take extra scrutiny when we were going through this and make sure that we could actually propose this sort of concept where we didn't have the ramps from Route 50 connect directly into Route 7. And we checked in with VDOT, and VDOT said, yes, that's okay, you can do that. But there's a couple nuances, but it's still okay to do so. To try to implement this, I think first of all we would have to kind of come to a workable concept and go from concept to preliminary engineering to engineering, and to do that would probably take some time as we try to work through city and county and Arlington County. So that I can't tell you how long that would take. There's another thing that has to be done. In order to do this, we kind of have to do what's called an interchange modification report. And so what we would need to do is that it requires more information, more numbers to kind of go through. But because we would do all that, we would probably be able to seek federal funds, regional funds, local funds as well, and state funds to implement this sort of project. So, but I can't speak to you in terms of the implementation and how to get this done because it's going to require buy-in from the property owners that would be affected as well as the jurisdictions that would be affected.
Any further questions from the CACT? No? Okay, Russ? Sorry, Russ?
My question is just real quick. You said at one point that the parcels were fairly consolidated. Have those developers indicated any interest in, the area where that road crossing over 50 is going into a mall that appears to be somewhat successful at this point? Has that developer said this is a plan that they'd be interested in selling or making changes?
Yes. As you know, we did extensive outreach to the property owners as well. We have several of them represented on our task force. Part of their homework, we asked them, is to provide us feedback on a concept that they could, what would it take to redevelop their properties. So they did some sketches, they did some alignments, some guesswork, and what they presented to staff, purely on a concept level, was very similar to what the community and the task force sketched out as well. So there is a lot of cooperation, a lot of alignment of ideas. We have been discussing with some of the property owners about the next stages of planning and development. We've currently in preliminary talks with the Williston area, possibly looking as maybe the first prototype for the area. 7 Corner Shopping Centers, BF Saul property owners, they gave us a concept, but as you know, they're essentially fully leased out, so they would probably come in at a later date. The McIlvains, who are the majority owners of the Sears department store area, they've been working with staff on trying to create potential numbers, and that's what we've used as our initial intensity numbers that we generated after we came up with a general concept. Is like, all right, this is how many units that's needed for them to consider redevelopment. and they gave us essentially the ceiling, and we've been going back and forth. Do we stay with the numbers that the developers have recommended, or do we get closer to what the community and staff members have designed? And we're kind of like somewhere in the middle. So yes, sorry to wrap up. Yeah, we have been thoroughly involved with the property owners. The only little kink to it is the corner at Seven Corners. Part of the reason why they weren't involved in this planning effort, or at least with a thorough land use study, is that they've resisted the idea of possible change, at least for now, we're hoping. Hopefully, as pieces start coming online, other property owners in the transitional areas will seek for a replanning and redevelopment.
So just to make sure I got the location right, that road that's crossing over 50, is that going right through the Home Depot or the Sears? I mean, I know they're sort of lined up, but...
So as you see right here, this is Peyton Randolph. And then you have, on...
It doesn't go through Sears. It doesn't go through Home Depot. It does go through the shopping center, but it goes to the west of Home Depot. But they would probably, if we were going to implement that, they would redevelop the shopping center. And what we've done is preserve enough ability for them to be able to keep the Home Depot or a form of it. So that gets to your question.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, my comment is, and I must disclose, I live right off the 700 block of East Broad Street. So that's Route 7. And there are at least 6 blocks of heavily developed residential going through there. And we get traffic build up all the way back to my block on bad days. So just keep in mind that that's just the same as Hillwood. We have our concerns. And I mean, traffic doesn't go too quickly, as fast as it does on Hillwood, because we have a very active radar police force that sits right across the street from my house with their gun, and they're stopping people all the time when it's not backed up. But it is a residential district, and so my concern would be that it looks as though you're funneling a lot of traffic to go back down that road or to accept more traffic from that road. And I'd just like to make sure that that isn't one of your intentions.
No, our intention is actually to help facilitate the movement of traffic. I believe the main choke point is the interchange, the intersection itself. And by improving that intersection, we'll have a ripple effect and hopefully reduce the amount of backup traffic into City of Falls Church. One of the main goals is to create, with close cooperation with the City of Falls Church, a better transition from the residential neighborhood of Broad Street onto Leesburg Pike. Right now, it's a very hard edge. You exit Falls Church City, you exit Falls Church City. There's no doubt about it, and we hope that
and we like that.
But with the improvements to the interchange, by simplifying it, as opposed to it's very convoluted. Even as a planner living here for 7 years, I take pride in never getting lost. I occasionally get in the wrong lane at the intersection. Yeah. It's rather frustrating to myself personally. So we hope that with a more smoother transition from neighborhood to neighborhood, a smoother transition at the intersection will have a rippling effect that would lessen the impact. Because as you know, it all comes down to the interchange and the bottlenecks that drives it.
And my final question is this. We, as planning department, have recently put through several different area plans. Of course, this is not one of them yet because we were focusing on other areas. So we know what it's like to have these community meetings and charrettes and come up with an idea and try to get it through. And my concern is, because I know that we do this ourselves, we have a plan, we say it's conceptual, but once we actually get the city council, or in your situation, the Board of Supervisors, to look at it and approve it, it seems then to develop a life of its own, and that changes aren't made. Now, I know that this is not something that's going to happen in the next few years. I realize this is a long-term plan. But it seems to me that once something is approved on the level that you're talking about, it just more or less proceeds. So I just want some assurance that we do have input after the 18th of November.
Yes, ma'am. As you know, we do have an open line of communication between all of our jurisdictions, our neighbors. Whenever there is a development proposal within a certain distance of the borders, which definitely would account for most of Seven Corners, we will reach out to the City Falls Church for their input prior to any adoption or any real movement.
And of course, you would have to reach out to us if you were going to use some of our land or whatever. Okay, so I just trying to get this on record, that's all.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't have much land.
Are there any other comments or
Can I
questions?
just ask about Route 50? Just quickly, any plans working with VDOT to upgrade Route 50? Because I know the truck traffic, certain sizes are not allowed.
There's no plans at this time to do anything with Route 50. All we have on our transportation plan map is to widen and improve to 6 lanes to be consistent from the Arlington line all the way out to the city of Fairfax. Is implementation, I think we're actually looking at it right now. Chris, are you looking at it? No? Okay. Well, anyways, maybe we will be. If not, we'll let you know.
Yeah, because that puts a lot of truck traffic on 7.
Yep.
Well, thank you for your
you.
presentation. Lauren, thank you for, and Jim, thank you for attending the meetings and speaking up for us, I'm sure. And if everyone is satisfied that their questions have been answered or at least presented, then
Just one
Jim, yes?
final note. I'd like to thank both of these gentlemen because they have really been at all of our sessions. Jim has been to both of the charrettes. Lauren has been at all of our meetings. He's not a shrinking violet,
no, we know he then.
right? So if he feels something needs to be said, he'll say it. And I think we all appreciate the fact that Falls Church has been really active in the task force. Arlington hasn't so much, but Falls Church has been right in there the whole time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tillman, and everyone else on your task force.
I would also like to just mention, we mentioned it earlier, for Fairfax County staff, we are planning with Urban Land Institute and COG this TAP study that will be taking place, looking at the new area where the high school and middle school was transferred from the county to the city. And this is the October 15th and October 16th. So that group will be looking at it. Of course, it's a very complex arrangement there with Falls Church, Fairfax, Metro, and highway systems. So I want to make sure you all are aware of that.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to speak.